Welcome to Heidi Relationships. Today, we'll read some more stories from Reddit. But before we start, I would really appreciate if you could subscribe to the channel, like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe leave a comment down below. That would help the channel a lot. Thank you very much in advance.
The first one is titled, My Wife, 32F, said her ex's name while we were having sex. My wife and I have been married for 4 years and we have a 2-year-old. We dated on and off for 3 years before getting married. Last night, she said her ex's name while we are having sex. She gave some weird excuse as to why. She said it's a common name, it is a very common name, and must have heard it recently? I wasn't going to start a big argument with her at that time. It has since gotten me worried about why she did that. For some background, this was a guy she was with for a couple years before I met her. They met in college and were serious for some time. They had broken up when I met her and decided they were better as friends. They were friends for years before they dated. We started dating, but he remained in the picture. He was her best friend first and foremost, and I grudgingly went along with it for her. Several months pass and I put my foot down, saying it's too uncomfortable for me. There was some resistance, but she steps back from him. Every time we broke up, she was with him. We finally reconciled and got engaged. He apparently didn't know this and stops talking to her. She was devastated, which should have been a red flag. We talked about it, and she was happy to have chosen me. Now after this has happened, I'm tempted to see if she's gotten back in contact with him again. I know she's checked in on his social media because I saw the searches on the laptop. She doesn't know I know that. I don't think she'd cheat, but this guy was always different for her. Do I just confront her? Do I start going through her phone? Or am I being paranoid? A user in the comments said, "Too late now, but this is the type of girl you walk away from when all these red flags show themselves during the dating stage. Instead, you married her. Well, at least you know who she is thinking of when you are ducking her. I would be very curious to know when the last contact was. She's still searching him on social media, she's probably not over him. I would look into everything." Another user said, "Yeah, I've never in my life taken an ex name by accident, nor have I ever taken any common name that I heard on a TV show or something. Your relationship has so many red flags that you've ignored. So many excuses that you've just accepted. I don't know what you're going to do to find any evidence. I don't know how you're going to react when you find evidence. You've allowed so much to happen that I question if at this point ignorance is just bliss. You're not going to get a straight answer from her. Sounds like she's never been over him and you were always the safe bet. She's married with a kid yet still keeping tabs on him. When you have to force or give an ultimatum for a partner to cut off an ex, they may cut them out of their life, but rarely do they cut them out of their heart and mind. It's something they should already know they have to do, or something they should understand when you first bring up it being uncomfortable. The moment you get any pushback on it is when you know they aren't 100% invested in you." Edit. Saw a bunch of comments and out privacy. In a marriage, everything should be open and transparent. You shouldn't feel bad about going through her phone, social media. In all my relationships I have an open phone policy because I have nothing to hide. The moment I need to keep things private away from my partner, chances are it's because I know my partner wouldn't approve of whatever it is I'm hiding. The next one is titled, Update, My Wife, 32F, said her ex's name while we were having sex. Thank you everyone for your help and advice. I did my investigating before talking to her. I went through his social media first, but nothing explicitly saying anything was going on. There were a few mentions of his love in some comments, but that could mean anything. I did look at the phone bill and there looks to be calls with him pretty regularly. On to hers, I was able to get on her phone when she was asleep. She must have forgot I knew the code. Nothing in texts and no weird calls. So, she deleted them. I did find some apps she tried to keep hidden, like Snapchat and Kik. Sure enough, there's their conversations. And pictures. I took pictures of all of it on my phone to have as proof. She exploded when we had the conversation and left with our child to her mother's. I contacted a lawyer and am in the process of a divorce and figuring out custody. I'm heartbroken and am angrier than anything else. I'm angry at her, but I'm also angry at myself for dismissing so many red flags. The conversations I found were confirming they were having an affair. The pictures were ones they were exchanging, including nudes. The next one is titled, My wife wants me to shave my head to support her. I'm a 32-year-old man, and my wife is 29. She was recently diagnosed with alopecia, which means her hair will fall out, possible permanently, and she already has bald spots. It's been hard emotionally for both of us, her especially and me also, since I'm going to be married to a bald woman, but I have supported her through this every way I can. My wife wants to take the plunge soon and for me to be the one who shaves her head. Recently saw this video on Instagram of this guy shaving his wife's head and shaving his right after. She showed it to me and asked, "Would you do that for me?" Here's the thing. I shaved my head once in my early 20s as a dare. I hated it so much and vowed to never do it again, unless I go bald someday. Also, my wife might be bald forever, so would I have to go bald forever as well? I told her I didn't want to, and she started saying that I'm not supporting her and should just divorce her if I don't want to be married to a bald girl. Really? I bought her 4 nice wigs for over $100 out of my own pocket. Have done nothing but been a shoulder to cry on. All this just because I won't shave my head? A user in the comments said, "How, exactly, is it going to be hard emotionally for you to be married to a bald woman? She's still the exact same person. You won't be married to a bald woman, you'll be married to your wife, who happens to be bald. What about when she ages? What about if she got cancer and lost her hair? She's overreacting because she's extremely emotional right now and you're being a bit harsh about this. You have every right to not shave your head, but for God's sake I hope you haven't talked about this being emotionally hard for you." Another user said, "Also, one good wig would cost around $500. Maybe do some research and get her an awesome wig. If my husband asked, I'd do it for support. Once. Your wife is feeling vulnerable and unattractive. You as her best friend for life are supposed to be supportive. She will get used to it, but right now she's needy. Help her out however you can. Good luck." The next one is titled, Update, My wife wants me to shave my head for her. So, I ended up thinking about it. I mentioned in my post that my wife's baldness might be permanent and if I shave too I will have to stay bald forever. I took some of your advice and decided to do it just once, since I know this is hard for her. So last night, I let her shave mine off first. I wasn't as ecstatic as she was, but seeing how happy she was made it all worth it. Then it was her turn. She got upset, understandably, but I gave her a quick pep talk and told her if I could do it, she will be able to. Hair or none, she is nothing but my beautiful wife. I even offered to keep my bald look for as long as her hair doesn't grow back. If that was what she wanted me to do to support her. Then I got to shaving her bald. There were some tears from both of us. But she was so happy that I was able to support her and show her she wasn't alone. Thank you for your responses to my other posts. And no, we didn't record the shaving of the heads for clout at all, but I did it to support her and no other reason. The next one is titled, Military Spouse Accuses Me of Cheating on My Husband with My Husband. I've been living in Japan for a little over 2 years with my husband. He was born here, and we decided to move to his hometown. It's a small city, but there's enough to do without getting bored. I'd describe us as an AMWF couple, Asian man, white female for those who don't know. It's not so common in Western countries, and it can feel like we are some rare shiny Pokemon as AMWF in rural Japan. Lots of staring, occasional secret picture, or even small chats if an old lady is brave enough to approach us. It can feel uncomfortable eating at a restaurant because kids will turn around in their seat and stare at us the whole time with an open fish mouth. Coincidentally, there's a small U.S. military base located in this city. The closer you are downtown, the more American families you see. I'm constantly mistaken for being military by Americans and Japanese, which is understandable. Besides myself, I only know 5 other interracial marriages here. It's always locals who ask about my American husband when I'm out alone, which I respond in Japanese that my husband is Japanese, and I live here or something along those lines. Americans never ask about my marriage as they assume my spouse is American. When we are together in public, we do abnormal couples behavior such as holding hands. No, couples rarely hold hands in public, let alone say, I love you. We don't go downtown too often since it's all pay to park and it's a nightmare to find a place. It was a beautiful warm day for the first time in months, but we decided to battle for a spot and walk around the shops. The crowd was heavy since the weather was great and winter was ending. The season for new American families to move here just finished, so I'm sure this was many people's first time to leisurely walk and shop outside. We find a parking spot and make our way to the outside shops. Of course, we are holding hands and casually talking and laughing. Wow, I hear this from an American woman about 10 feet behind us. You should know that a Japanese stereotype against Americans is that we are rudely and obnoxiously loud. And this, wow, was loud enough for me to turn my head around at the noise. She was with 2 other moms who had 3 kids each. They were staring at me, but perhaps we just accidentally had eye contact at the right time. Seriously, another little homewrecker is doing this in public? Chill woman, you're so loud even I can hear you. We find a table nearby at the Starbucks outside. We are enjoying our drinks when the same group of women approached us with their strollers in tow. They definitely had some sort of purpose with something to say to us. Let's call her Ona, woman in Japanese. Ona. Excuse me, but you need to keep whatever you're doing in your messed up home. Doing that in public in front of families to see is disgusting and immoral. My kids don't need to see such a bad display of marriage. I'm so confused, as was my husband who can speak English. Who knew drinking coffee outside was a crime against humanity and marriage? Me. I'm sorry? What did we do? Ona. You know exactly what you're doing. Asterisk she points to my wedding ring asterisk. Me. No, I don't. Ona. Good lord, does your husband know about this? Is he on a ship right now? That's so like a dependopotamus. Her friends laugh. In case you don't speak military, a dependopotamus is slang for a military wife who stays at home all day, doesn't clean, uses their spouse as an ATM, and looks like Jabba the Hutt. It dawns on me, she thinks I'm a military spouse and I'm cheating on my American husband. I started laughing because she's suggesting I'm cheating on my husband, with my husband. Me. This is my spouse. I'm actually not part of the military community and have a Japanese visa. Ona looks at my significant other up and down. The 2 women behind her apologize, but the Ona didn't believe it. Ona. No one would voluntarily want to live in this little town. Nice lie, but you're not representing the military community. You make all of us wives look like whores. Who is your husband and what's his rank? Also, I need your dependent ID. My husband is a high rank, so he'll make sure your husband is aware of your infidelity. She pulls out her phone to probably type my response. I'm offended since this is actually a nice place to live and very open to foreigners. Me. Look, my husband's name is Ray, not his real name. I don't want to reveal personal info, and he's sitting right here. I'm not going to show you my military ID since I don't have one, and you're not the police. As proof, you can obviously see our wedding bands match and here's a picture. I show her my phone screen which is of us in traditional Japanese clothes on our wedding day. Her eyes became huge at the picture. Her 2 friends and their spawn have already started walking away. Ona. Why are you in a relationship with him? You should be in a normal relationship and start having a family with American kids. She says some other statements which I'd consider racist against the Asian race. It's so ironic because we are in Japan, and she's fussing about me being married to a Japanese man. My husband has been quiet throughout the whole exchange and says to me we should go. I agree and stand up. Me. Stop. The things you are saying are extremely offensive. I was part of the military community myself some years ago and what you're doing is against spousal conduct. She smirked. Go ahead and tell people what I did. Then. My high-ranking husband is an E7, and everything will be swept under the rug no matter what happens. You can't touch me. So that's what I did. Note, this is a small military community. Someone does something minor and it's talked about between wives like chickens. Later that day, I run into my friend who works on the base, and she's well known in the community for being one of the main event coordinators. I don't miss this chance to comply with Ona's demand and explain to my friend about the exchange and how it made my husband extremely uncomfortable with her remarks. She asked me if this person looked like so-and-so, which I said yes. My friend rolls her eyes. Friend. She just arrived a couple months ago and is already causing problems with rumors and drama. Looks like we have a racist, too. I'll make sure what she said is passed on. It's been half a year later and I didn't hear anything about Ona again since I distanced myself from making military friends here. I've only been in my new city for a little over 2 years and experienced more drama from military families than I have my whole high school career. That is, until now. Last week, I ran into my friend who's getting ready to leave back to the United States. We had a little discussion about her moving and my family planning and dropped a bombshell. Friend. Do you remember Ona, who accused you of cheating on your non-existent military spouse and called your husband a racist name? Me. Of course. I haven't heard anything from her since. Friend. Well, I mentioned we were already having problems with her not long after she got here. I told my boss that there's a person who was bothering and threatening civilians and asking for IDs, which isn't allowed for someone with her status. My boss was extremely interested after I mentioned her name because Ona was scheduled for an interview in my department. I suggested we look at her social media accounts from her past behavior, because we don't tolerate racism. It was easy to find her Twitter and Facebook, particularly Facebook since we have many mutual friends. Her SNS was shocking. While she set her Facebook to private, her Twitter was littered with malicious tweets and retweets. This included racism slang for many nationalities, colorful language, and using her husband's military rank to bully others. She made it very clear that she wants to see her current city burn to the ground. And why would anyone want to learn Japanese since it sounds terrible? We printed some of the more extreme things she posted, and we still invited her to the interview. Oh, and did I mention my boss is Japanese? So, she comes into the interview which I was part of. I asked 3 good things about her, which is she says, dependent, gets things done, and friendly. My boss just looked at her for a second before he pulled out her tweets and asked her to explain how she can friendly serve the local community if she hates it so much. Ona was floored and said someone hacked into her account, despite there being at least 3 years of slanderous tweets. We thanked her for coming and said we can't accept an employee with this conduct. As far as I know, she's still not working because some spouses found her Twitter not long after the interview and was shared in all departments. No one will touch her application now. Me. So all of this was discovered because I told you about her accusations? Friend. Yes. Oh, and she's kind of an outcast socially right now because she cheated on her husband a couple months ago. There you have it, folks. Because one person couldn't mind their own business, they lost a potential job and had their social media exposed. Super ironic since she became the dependopotamus and adulterer, the same thing she was accusing me of. The next one is titled, I Ada for not punishing my daughter for mocking her cousin? My wife and her younger sister are best friends. As a result, when our middle daughter and her cousin were born around the same time, my wife really expected them to also be best friends. With 16 years of hindsight, I can say with certainty that the expectation was misplaced. Nothing happened in particular. My daughter just doesn't like her cousin. My wife keeps pushing the relationship. This includes making my daughter spend time with her cousin during family gatherings, inviting her cousin on trips, forcing my daughter to call her. We're pretty sure I'm the favorite parent, a fact that keeps my ego well inflated, and, therefore, my apathy towards the situation is not well received by my wife. From my perspective, this isn't important, and I do not possess the ability to make 2 teenagers become friends. I'm also pretty sure that trying to push this kind of knuckle-headed stuff makes kids not want to speak to you. This is where I'm probably in butthole. Yesterday, my wife forced my daughter to video call her cousin. My daughter rejected to request, and my wife told her, unless you have a valid reason for disliking your cousin, you will do this because we're family. The call occurred. This morning, we awoke to a PowerPoint presentation titled Valid Reasons to Dislike Cousin. Using clips from the Zoom call, segments included Why is cousins' voice so grating? A music theory approach, a case study, conversations that provide no value, rethinking the idea that there are no dumb questions, etc. With the benefit of a couple of hours of hindsight, it was a very cruel takedown of her cousin's entire personality. My wife was furious. My eldest daughter and I lost our crap laughing. My wife is demanding I support her in punishing my daughter for bullying her cousin. I have refused because I feel this whole situation wouldn't have occurred if she didn't push the relationship, but I'm starting to have second thoughts because it was very mean. Iata? A user in the comments said, NTA. Unless your daughter sends this presentation to her cousin, or shared it with anybody else, it isn't bullying. What is she to be punished for? Doing what your wife asked and gave reasons for why she dislikes her cousin? Having no chemistry, a dislike for another person and not wanting to spend her time on that person? For having an opinion that differs from her mother's. Talk to your daughter and make sure her presentation is deleted, as it would be terrible should others get their hands on it. Your daughter is almost an adult, and your wife is pushing her away with her demands. By the way, your daughter sounds wonderful, your wife not so much. Another user said, Esh. Here is what you must do. Sit down with your daughter and explain that you and her mother have handled this situation poorly. Tell your daughter that you and your wife disagree and that rather than working it out between the two of you, you have put her in the middle of quite a lot of nonsense. Apologize and refuse to have any conversation about the relative merits of your niece's personality. Next, sit down with your wife. Explain that you believe the two of you need to take a completely different approach to the issue and that you would like to remove your daughter from the equation. Then explain that you believe your child should be required to be pleasant to all of her relatives during family occasions and that beyond that it is important to leave the children to navigate their own relationship. Apologize for engaging in a counterproductive conversation about whether or not they should be friends. Then gently explain that forcing a friendship, including calls and socialization beyond family events, is not fair to either of the girls. Just as you would not want to be forced to socialize and fake a relationship with someone who does not appeal to you as a friend, you most certainly would not want to be the person foisted upon an unwilling friend. Frankly, this initiative of your wife's is quite unkind to her niece. Lastly, let your wife know that you think the three of you should sit down and make a new plan that respects everyone's wishes. That conversation can certainly start with the importance of kindness. You really don't want to encourage your daughter to dissect and criticize other people's personalities, but both you and your wife need to acknowledge that you backed your daughter into a corner and let her know that you don't think she would have composed an unkind PowerPoint if she weren't being pushed into an unwanted relationship. Then go on to agree to friendly behavior during family events. Yes, that will mean that she has to socialize with her cousin when you've all gathered for a holiday, and establish some boundaries in terms of trips. The cousin should not be included unless there is a particular reason for your niece to join you. This is the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed the relationship stories. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video and write a comment. I really appreciate your support and it helps my channel so much. Thank you.